When the world feels overwhelming, I turn to nature for some much-needed perspective. Thriving in the face of adversity, that's something the incredible species of our world do every day. Wow, right in front of us. I'm Chris Morgan. Join me on The Wild as we explore stories of hope and resilience in nature and what they can teach us about ourselves and each other. Listen to The Wild wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, Marco, recently I've been thinking a lot about how ideas sort of like go from being ideas to being things. And like you see it happen in people's worlds, you see it there. And it always starts, I think, with saying it out loud. I don't know. I think there's like such a powerful moment when you go from being like, hey, this thing's running around in my head, to then you're like, I'm actually going to say this out loud to somebody. And then you're like, oh God, I said this out loud. But it's like the most powerful thing when you do that, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's a way of committing to yourself once you kind of talk to a friend or, a loved one about it. Yeah, it deepens your connection to the idea and then makes you want to go forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you don't want to do it too much, and then because you're all talking, no game. But like, I think there's a certain type of person.
Exactly. You got to save them.
Yeah, you got to save them for the right moment. But I feel like there's a certain type of person that when they come up with an idea, it's like you can watch it grow. And has that ever happened to you?
I mean, I think one example off the top of my head is I coach a climbing team here in Oahu, and I had this idea a few years ago because I go up to Tahoe every year to be with my family and hang out and climb. And I was talking with my girlfriend one day, and I was saying like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to like get the kids to Tahoe and like get them on granite and boulder outside for a week or so. And my girlfriend Lena was like, yeah, you should just do that. Like, why don't you? Your family has a cabin and you're lucky enough to go up there when you want. So just do it. So that kind of pushed me to talk to the other coaches and, talk to the families, see how interested they would be about sending their kids out to Tahoe with us, the coaches, and some of the parents. And then basically a few months later, we were rolling like 15 deep up in South Lake, hopping around boulders and, getting the kids on all the classics. So
what was it like for a bunch of kids that are like so psyched about climbing, but kind of have to do it inside to then go take that to, an incredible place like the Tahoe area, which has such good climbing?
Yeah, it's hard to put into words, but it was a really cool feeling taking these kids around to places where I learned how to climb outside and kind of like sharing my stoke and like passing it on to them and seeing them learn how to climb outside in the places that I did. I think that was like pretty priceless.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
So today we're going to hear from Shane Schieffer. Shane just turned 50 this year. In September, he swam the entire 140-mile stretch of Lake Powell completely unassisted. And I think Shane's story is kind of like the quintessential example of what we were just talking about, of not just listening to that voice in your head that's prodding you outside of your normal routine, but actively engaging with that voice to explore the outer limits of that idea.
You just got to make sure it's not multiple voices, just one. No, sorry.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah, this is an incredible story. I'm Fitz Cahal.
I'm Marco Seiler Gonzalez. You're listening to the Dirtbag Diaries.
Sweet.
My name's Shane Schieffer. I live near Boulder, Colorado. I'm an avid outdoorsman, and particularly wilderness and backcountry experiences of any kind. I am the COO of VersaClimber, which is a elite fitness company, and I recently swam the full length of Lake Powell, 140 miles, towing all of my own gear, self-supported. So I was primarily raised in Arizona, Tempe. I think sometimes in the book, A River Runs Through It, and he talks about the Montana of my youth. And I got a little bit of the Arizona of my youth there. It wasn't as populated, and the backcountry still had springs you could drink from without purifying the water. And I was rock climbing and mountain biking and exploring off trail in places that are now golf courses and houses. That's where I met Jerome. He was a high school mate of mine. We met earlier, but we became very close junior and then especially senior year of high school. And our friendship and adventuring together has endured since that time.
My name is Jerome Naleski. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. Gosh, I've lived here all my life except for the 4 years in high school when I met Shane. Our relationship really grew in high school, and we started just getting out. We got into mountain biking together and kind of took off from there, and we started getting into little adventures, and he would come up with an idea, and I'd say, yes, we'd go.
Ever since their audacious youth running through the wilderness of Arizona, Shane and Jerome kept up the adventure, usually by following a simple ethos. Pick an idea and run with it.
I actually define adventure as any time you mix two abnormal things together. So rock climbing is not, to me, an adventure. That's a sport. And mountain biking is not an adventure, and it's a sport. But if you bike with your rock climbing gear to a crag, climb the thing, haul your bike to the top and bike off the top and come back, now you've got an adventure. You know, you've got logistics, you got gear, you got unpredictable things taking place, and that's what creates adventure. So I guess the reason I stir these together is my hunger for adventure, and I love what happens when you combine odd things together. In this case, what I would call swim backpacking, which is essentially what I did across Lake Powell.
Swimming the entire length of Lake Powell at the age of 50. Shane hadn't swam at all since his 30s, which kind of begs the question, why now?
I actually know exactly why now. I lost my dad to cancer 4 years ago, and that was really hard. And I've always been this person that believes the body has this incredible capacity for healing. You know, and in the case of cancer, I think it's shown, you know, we're all producing cancerous cells. We have atypical cells multiplying. The body has a check and balance to hold that in place. And so I guess in kind of a Taoist framework in my mind, you know, if you're living in harmony with yourself and eating well and moving and that kind of stuff, that you should be able to keep things like cancer under control. So it was really hard to see him not be able to do that. I'm a curious guy. I'm always reading, and I'm reading this book about healing in the desert Southwest. And the guy's a Western doctor, and he's working on the Navajo Nation, and he's working with different tribes in Arizona. And he's having to come with terms with what he was trained in Western medicine versus what he's witnessing and experiencing as he works with people who have a different belief system and identity than he has. And one of his lines in that book is that healing works best when a person's spiritual belief system and the modality of healing are in alignment. And that just had me thinking. This is early one morning, and this is back in about March. I'm reading this and I'm thinking, what is my spiritual framework in the context of healing if I were to face something like cancer? And it was, you know, a profound question because I lost my dad to it. So I'm not asking the question lightly. I was raised Catholic, and you know, I had a deep spirituality when I was young, and I still love Catholicism for its sense of ceremony, which is, I think, important in life, and the messaging, but I don't have that belief system in the same way. I'm very independent. I don't like joining any group. I don't like anyone telling me what to do. But that means you have to find your own spiritual way, which is hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of reading and thinking, and you're trying to be open enough to accept ideas and walk around with them to see how that incorporates into who you are. But it's also, do you have a belief system if you don't have walls where you think these are boundaries for me? And so you're trying to always play with that. It's a confusing space to live in. I've lived in that space now for 30 years. But I was asking, like, what is my spiritual framework in the context of healing? And it actually didn't take long. I was sitting in this very spot, and I'm like, you know what? It is movement. It is movement in the outdoors. That is my rejuvenating space. I believe that when the body activates through movement, it activates at every level. But I did have this idea about Powell, and it came up that morning that I Googled it. I'm like, it still hasn't been done. No one has taken the time to get to experience Glen Canyon as Lake Powell from the top to the bottom. So then I trained for 3 months. I haven't told anybody what I'm thinking, what I'm contemplating. I'm keeping it very guarded. I trained for 3 months and I do a 10-hour test. And I was nervous before I got into that water because 10 hours in the water is just a long time. How does the skin hold up? How does the mind hold up? Can I have enough nutrition doing that? Like, it's a huge amount of work. Am I really ready for this? I hopped in that day and I swam 1,250 flip turns. In 10 hours and 40 minutes, I had been swimming for 10 hours of that. I did 17 and a half miles and my body held up, and I checked over the next few days. What's sore? That's the indicator if your training's working, right? What's sore? What hurts? What didn't work right? And it worked pretty good, actually. So I'm still not telling anyone about it. And then I'm thinking, okay, how do I want to do this? And for me, it was just so clear. If I'm going to do it, I got to pull my gear. It's got to be an expedition. I mean, okay, so there's two components. The ego component is I'm 50. Like, someone can beat this record any day, first of all. But how many people are crazy enough to do it self-supported? At least it'll stand for a little while. But that wasn't the bigger part. The bigger part was it's an expedition. If I have to do the gear and the logistics and I have to haul my stuff. And, there's so much more to it than just getting in the water. If I just got in the water, it's going to feel like that 10-hour test 10 days in a row. The vibe doesn't fit Lake Powell. It doesn't fit the water for me. It doesn't fit that environment. It doesn't fit a sense of exploration and unfolding and curiosity. For all of those reasons, doing it, pulling my own gear, self-supported, was the clear answer.
I'm attempting to swim the full length of Lake Powell, and the number one question people ask is, how are you going to sleep? So here's the plan.
That is one of several gear breakdown videos that Shane posted on his Instagram in preparation for the swim. And he was clearly capturing the imagination and stoke of others because the video has nearly 10,000 likes and 200 comments.
Yeah, the gear is maybe one of the more appealing aspects of it to people. For example, my video on gear got almost half of the total views of all the videos. People just really like seeing that component, which I am thrilled with because I am such a gear geek. And I am, like people who like to be in the backcountry, like gear represents potential. Each piece of gear is a new kind of adventure you can go on. So my system, I put it together intuitively based on what I know about doing endurance events, which were never longer than 48 hours straight for me, or 4 days, but with sleeping at night. So I put it together intuitively on that, based on backpacking, because like I said, that was kind of my calming perspective. Is this is swim backpacking? Treat it like that, plan for it like that. Don't exert harder than that, because you got to make it 10 days and you don't know if the arms and shoulders can be the equivalent of legs. What I settled on for the setup was to pull all of my gear on a stand-up paddleboard. And the reason was it's flat, so I can really use it as a barge, so to speak, and stack my gear on top of it. So the stand-up board gave me accessibility. Also, it's got a really great fin setup in back. It's a triple fin with one big fin in the center, and so it tracks really well. It's wider than a board, so I know Lake Powell can have some massive storms, so I'm going to have a little wider leverage to keep it from capsizing. And I have one, so I can start testing it right now. I don't have to buy anything. So that's how I decided stand-up paddleboard. The first thing I did was just throw a bunch of weight on a stand-up paddleboard and see what it feels like. So I just took some Rubbermaids. I filled it with bricks. I filled it with weights. I filled it with just whatever was in my garage until I thought I had about 100 pounds worth on it. And then as a builder, I thought, and I wasn't right about this, but I thought a solid boom pole is the definite way to go. I want the tightest connection to me forward and backward with the gear as possible, so it's not jerking me and pulling on me. So that way we're moving together. I was very concerned about kind of this whiplashing back and forth that can happen when something's having trouble tracking straight, and that would be a tug at each side, so that's going to take a lot of my energy. So I was convinced I needed a pole. And so I started with an aluminum pole, later experimented with 2 carbon fiber poles, ended up with a single 25-foot carbon fiber pole. I have several dry boxes and dry bags. I have a flagpole, which is the form of a stand-up paddle as a safety device if I need it, but it's really carrying the orange flag and my gravity-fed water purification system. And then I've got a life jacket on the nose that I can quick release in case the weather gets really big and I just need, for safety reasons, obviously at that point I'm violating. I can't use that for forward progress, but it could help me in a really dangerous situation. And I'm just wearing board shorts. I like the feel of the water. I don't want a wetsuit. I like that it kind of declares the adventure of the thing, not the performance of the thing. And so this is just a webbing waist belt attached to a pole pulling the gear. I thought I was training with 100 pounds. When I weighed it, it turns out it was 160 pounds. Then I put together my gear, which I thought was probably less than that. And when I weighed it was 215 pounds of gear. And then as I'm going out there, I'm like, you know what? The silt in the Colorado River could clog my water purification system. I better get a bag for water that's collapsible for the first few days until the silt clears up. And so I stop in Moab at Gearheads, which is my favorite outdoor outpost, in the Four Corners to just find something for an adventure. And I buy a 5-gallon bag and put that on the nose. Now I've got 255 pounds of gear on a stand-up paddleboard with a 25-foot carbon fiber boom pole attached to my waist by a piece of webbing. That's how I set out.
To hear Shane tell it, dialing in the rig and all of his gear was pretty much just as important as the physical training.
I mean, I guess it's kind of two separate adventures, but it's so much fun, that tinkering of the gear. I would set out our kitchen stools in front of our house or in our backyard, and we've got a public walkway behind our fence, and so everyone can see, what I'm up to. So I'm always doing some weird thing. I think my neighbors are used to it. So I got this weird looking craft with, slowly coming together with all these boxes and straps, and I'm working it over and over because I have to rig it and de-rig it daily during training. And then I need it to be efficient while I'm out there. And so I'm constantly, how do I tie the straps? Which things are knotted on there so they're always there, so they stick with the box? I mean, the buckle's on the same side every time. I'm dressing the loose ends the same way every time. Rock climbing teaches you to do everything with perfect repetition. That's how safety is created. River guiding teaches you to rig to flip, and to make sure that you have protocols on how you tie things down. And so I'm using that combination of things to make sure I'm making a secure, stable craft. And, I'm moving a box. What if this is up here? What if I reverse this? I'm just sitting there sometimes for hours looking at it, doing nothing but looking at it, letting my subconscious work through the problems of it. Amazon, was delivering 4 rounds of packages a day because it's the fastest way to just get anything, whether it's I want, inulin powder and psyllium husk to help with make sure I could go to the bathroom well out there, to I want a piece of physical gear. There's not a lot of places other than Amazon that you can get hold of that. So, ChatGPT and Amazon are constantly up, and I'm just flooding this stuff in and tinkering and moving and changing and building and testing and just repeating that. And yeah, that's all joy for me.
After months of training, breaking down his gear dozens of times and putting it all back together, the next step in Shane's adventure is incredibly simple: swim.
So I start at Height Crossing Bridge, which is this remarkable bridge, 400 feet overhead, canyon walls, and I'm in current, and I'm in the silt of the Colorado River, which I have rafted on, but I have never swam with goggles in. And as soon as I put my head underwater, I am astonished. There is so much silt in the water of the Colorado that 4 to 5 inches underwater, all light is gone. It's pitch black. You can't see your hand right in front of your face. You're not even seeing a brown glow from the light coming through the water. It's black, just that far down, which was wild. And I think it freaked out some people who were watching it, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing. It was just an element of the journey I hadn't expected, but it wasn't unwelcome. So I already knew it might be a little scary to swim in current. I didn't know, are there rocks inside of the current? Because it's moving in places 4 miles an hour, and hitting a rock with a boom pole and a 250-pound craft attached to you may not be great. Swimming into a strong eddy line attached to that may not be great, so there's a little bit of nerves in there. But I stayed center of channel. I did kind of exhaust the neck and shoulders with the lifting to sight. I learned it at what I called sea turtle. I'm just lifting up the eyes until, in a very relaxed way, my head's coming up until the goggles are just above the water line, and they kind of slowly lower back down, timed in the stroke. And with the current, I'm maybe lifting a little higher, certainly more often. And so there's some neck strain to it. But the current itself was really fun. When you're canoeing on a river, you see these little circles that spread on the surface. When you swim through that, you feel this huge upwelling of water blooming around you, and you can feel this massive object underneath you. And then you also realize how fast you're moving because you feel how quickly you move through that bloom of water. So that's kind of wild and exhilarating, exhilaration being part wonder and maybe part fear as it happens. So the Colorado is forming this moving delta where it enters Lake Powell. It's this big lump of sand. And so I've gone now 12 miles. Suddenly the river is very wide and only maybe 10 inches deep. And my chest is dragging across the silt. And I can't do a stroke anymore because my arm doesn't have space. And I try standing up, but I can't really stand because it's silt. So I'm going, more than knee deep into it. And the current is moving quite quickly. So it's dragging my stand-up paddleboard behind me, and now it's pulling me backwards. And it was a little disorienting. It only lasted for a few hundred yards. I kind of did a mix of sucking my legs through the silt, trying to walk, and then getting down and trying to do a swim with my arms at water level out to the side like a frog, one arm at a time. I get through that, and then I get to the start of the lake. And here it is. That's amazing. I didn't know where it would be. It's 12 miles in right now, and here it is, the start of Lake Powell. 2, it is cold. It is Pacific Ocean cold, like 60 degrees. I've got huge goosebumps. I'm genuinely chilled. And it took me until I started swimming again, and I kind of realized what's happening is this silt water is so heavy that it's plunging into the lake and diving to the bottom, and it's churning up the cold water from the bottom of the lake. And so you're getting this cold water at the top.
Shane is reaching for food. Hopefully he doesn't reach into the poop box.
Shane was swimming Lake Powell self-supported, but of course, he wasn't alone.
We kind of nicknamed me his emotional support dog. Just because I was only there to be there in case anything he needed, but really he really went to do it self-supported. And originally he just wanted to go and do this solo. And his wife was like, "Nah, this is such a big thing. You can't go by yourself." So that's when I was like, "Okay, I'll go with you. I'll take some time." Not really thinking about what it would entail, what I would be doing. And then as we started talking about it, getting closer, and I said, "Hey, I'll go the whole time," he really laid out to me, "Hey, I really want to do this on my own. I want you to be there." So I kind of thought in the idea of, okay, I'm just there in case of something, in case he needs something. The weather's really bad and that kind of thing. But otherwise, I really had no input. I would ask him, where are we going to sleep? What are we going to do today? And I'd let him figure it out. So I would just kind of tag along going, okay. He printed out basically Google Earth screenshots and was like, this is where I know I want to be in vicinity. I look at this, but it's just a 2D picture. It's not like a real topo map or anything. But I think he spent so much time looking at Google Earth and looking at this and where it's going to be that he had the idea. So I just let him go with it. I set up my own camp. He had his own camp, his own gear. I mean, he was wanted to make it so individual. I would set up I have a nice sand anchor and I'd put it in and do all that. And he wouldn't use it. He's like, "I want to do this on my own." Like I was by myself. So he would do his own rock and do his own anchor and do everything. So I didn't help at all. Or if he was getting lost, he'd go up into a side canyon kind of a thing. I would just motor along behind him, just going, "Oh, this is going to take some time," until he figures it out.
More after the break. Stay with us.
Even though it's dark before I get home from work, even though it's getting colder and rainier and crappier, I still love getting out on the trails just to clear my mind. Oboe has set up camp in the legendary hiking and backpacking hub of Bozeman, Montana, and you know what? It gets really cold there, so they know a thing about how to hike and move in the cold, and they know insulated footwear. Oboe's has several new styles built for snowy days and winter hiking, so you can get out and enjoy the most soulful time of year, the time when there's fewer people, it's a little bit quieter, and the light is amazing.
Now through December 1st, you can get 25% off any style. That's 25% off any style when you use the code CYBER at checkout at obosfootwear.com. Obos, love hiking.
Morning, day 9, number 38. Time to read the maps. Where are we? Where are we going? Where have we been?
It was frustrating because there'd be times where we'd be in these huge open bays, and I'm going, okay, if we just went that straight that way, he could cut off, a mile or something. But because his line of sight was against the rocks, he would do these curving, swimming motions, and I'm sure, he ended up swimming longer than what it was actually mapped out to be. It was somewhat like internally painful, internally stressful, but again, I knew it didn't matter at that time. We knew we had all this time, so I knew he would either figure it out or we would just take a lot of extra time. And, bummer for him because he's got to swim more, but he knew it and he wanted to really give that a whirl, and it worked, really.
Navigation was interesting because the surroundings look very different an inch above the water versus 3 feet above the water in a boat. And there's a little bit of a lensing effect I've learned where it's difficult to discern distance sometimes. Something very far away, if it's right above the water, can look much closer than it is. So several times I swam to what I thought was a couple hundred yards away, and it ended up being a mile or more to the spot I was looking at, due to kind of an optical illusion. And if I'm out of food or energy, that's really hard. But the way I navigated is I used my river guide skills, but instead of reading water, I was reading the canyon walls. So Glen Canyon has these sheer canyon walls that wind. And as I start swimming, I realize I didn't know I was aware of this, but the main channel almost always is the most vertical, unbroken sandstone face. There may be larger canyons to the side. Sometimes that looks like it could be the main channel, but usually there's a little more erosion or broken nature to the rock face. And so that was my hint as to where the canyon was going. That told me when to cross to left versus right to kind of shortcut the corners, so to speak. When the water is a half a mile wide, you save 6 miles over the course of 140 just cutting corners. So that helped me know where to go. I started paying attention to clouds, and I could tell what was going to happen with wind based on the kind of clouds I was seeing overhead. And I started navigating primarily my bearing, meaning the direction I was going, was by the sun, mostly. Sometimes clouds if the sun wasn't in a convenient place. But I would lift my head up and spot and see that I need to go this bearing for the next, hard to tell, 1 to 2 miles, but I need to be going this way. And then I take a reference point as I took a breath of where the sun was relative to me. And at that point, I would hardly ever look forward again. In fact, I started swimming with my eyes closed because I could still see where the sun was through my eyelids and through the tinted goggles on my breath. And I would just swim. I ran into the support or safety boat twice. I ran into a buoy once. I ran into the cliff wall a few times because I would just swim these long sections with my eyes closed, just holding the bearing. But it's not like there was a lot to see anyway. And actually, if you open your eyes, you're compelled to look up, and that drops your hips. So now you're plowing more water. So it helped me keep my form and just stay in the work. I was hoping to go through this sensory deprivation and maybe even a little madness. It's just like the mind isolated in this environment. But it turns out swimming is so much work that the mind happily sits in the back seat. I have one of those minds. I mean, why do I love big endurance stuff? When I'm working out, it's not until I'm 45 minutes in that the mind finally goes quiet. So that's where the joy of doing something really begins for me, is that space. And the mind lived there pretty much the entire time. There were thoughts, especially early on, but for the most part, it sits in the back seat and it's kind of lightly observing the turning of the arms and what's happening with the sun. Sometimes it checks out to the point that you look up and you realize you're not following your bearing anymore and you got to straighten up your course. But the mind did not have a lot of time to think about past. It did not have a lot of time to think about anything other, future or really process. I thought, I'm about to turn 50. Maybe I'll process a lot of life events out here. And maybe at a subconscious level it has. I've had some interesting mental side effects from this. But but I wasn't thinking in the way I thought I would be. And that was interesting to me.
Yeah. Do you think that was like your ego taking a backseat?
Yeah, interesting question, right? Like, of course, I like to perform. I compare myself to others. I have an ego. Of course. We all do. And mine may be even a little stronger than others. I'm a middle child. Am I doing this swim to like get some attention? I don't think so. But it's a factor we all carry, our ego. Yes, the first few days, ego was there because social media had exploded, which I didn't expect. I was totally disconnected from it while I was out there. Our rhythm was Jerome filmed and from the boat and did his commentary and all of that. I had my camera on my phone, and at night I'd do these reflections where I just did a selfie and said whatever was on my mind, and then I would hand him my phone, and he would connect to satellite and upload all the day's footage through Starlink. And then we had someone, who had good tools and connectivity to be able to assemble that and post it. So that was our workflow. Jerry was perfect. He did not tell me how many followers I had or what people were asking or what was in the comments. I was able to still bring people along, which I really wanted to do, but not have it in my head while I'm trying to do the work. And that was really nice. But the first few days, I had crossed 50,000 followers just before I left. I came from no followers. That's going to hit the ego a little bit. And so I'm swimming the Colorado and I'm like, what are people going to think? I'm not earning these miles. That was probably the biggest show of ego I saw in the mind while I was beginning. It fell away pretty quick. The thing that gave me peace is on day 2, I was like, you know what? I could go back and give away all of my followers. They're not mine to give away, but I don't have something planned to give them value after I'm done with this swim. But I could see the spirit that's on fire and the sense of adventure and maybe the weird joy of odd gear. And I could try and find them places that they could go and get that same inspiration. I don't have to try and perform. I don't have to strain to come up with weekly posts to keep them engaged, to protect this asset of followers. I don't have to play that game. And that gave me such a sense of peace out there. So I think that shows that the ego is pretty far back already. In fact, what I was striving for is connection while I was out there, not ego. And it was that mechanism that let me get to the connection rather than live in all the mental churning of ego or of even the interest that was surrounding it. And it let me be very present.
Can you explain that connection? Like, what were you looking to connect to?
The connection I was seeking while I was out there, one is just connection to the space. I love the wilderness. I rejuvenate in the wilderness. The stars of Utah are incredible. The water of Utah, whether that's the Colorado River or Lake Powell, is incredible. The unfolding of the canyon as you're going through it and the subtle changes in the landscape, where at the top, it's very much a river canyon. And at the bottom, it looks an awful lot like the Grand Canyon a little bit, or maybe Monument Valley, where you have these mesas and it's very far apart. Those transitions are interesting to me. One part of the connection is I just want to feel the landscape. I'm getting to traverse the length of the canyon in a way no one ever has. And I kind of like hiking the Grand Canyon. You feel and experience it different than looking into the Grand Canyon. I get to do the equivalent with Lake Powell, and I want to feel that experience. The second part of the connection is I want to connect to the work. I didn't use any headphones or music or audiobooks or anything to distract me. I was careful not to do mental techniques to distract from the work. I wanted to be present with the work. I wanted to feel the work. I think I'm old enough and have developed a strong enough mental capacity that I can feel the work and not panic, not run from it. I can sit in it for hours. It is uncomfortable. Day 2 and 3, I had shoulder pain all day long. That is emotionally taxing in the same way someone who just going through a surgery feels it. And that's on top of the physical work of the swim. And in fact, the physical work of the swimming going is what's causing the shoulder pain, So I'm having to do that work. And I wanted to do that work. It was a chance to experience something and have that become a part of me and me be changed because of it. I was hoping for connection to myself. I maybe got it at a subconscious level, obviously through the feeding of the environment and the experience, but not in a reflective way that I'm aware of yet. It was just enough work that the mind didn't have any energy cycles to ruminate too much. When it got very hard on day 2 and day 3, it's always hard to say without getting emotional, but I'd say my wife's name is Melanie, Mel. I'd say, hi, Mel. Hi, Milo. Hi, Savannah. Hi, Cheyenne. My kids. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. I would just say hi to everybody. And that was a way to feel present with the work. That was a way to honor their making it available for me to go do this. And it was a way to cope when it was very hard. So you connect to the people you love differently when you're away from them than when you're with them, and in a powerful way. And you come back remembering how you want to be connected to them. As I was getting closer, I just kept reminding myself, don't let some sort of musical rhythm enter your head. Hear the bubbles, feel the water. You've only got 4 days left, 3 days left, 2 days left. You're going to miss this. Just be with this, because it's going to be a very special time of your life, and you want to have as much of it as possible. Then as I got to the real wide areas that were more like Monument Valley, the winds were rough and the waves were big. And I had 2 different sections. The first one, I had swam 4.5 miles. I had only had a couple of shot blocks or cliff blocks, so not a lot of energy added. At this point, by the end, I had lost over 15 pounds, genuinely of fat. I had had 4 large drinks before I weighed myself, and it still said I had lost 15 pounds. And you can see it on me, and you can see it in my face. I look like Emperor Palpatine, or Senator, whatever. Palpatine from Star Wars. I look both sunken and puffy at the same time. Like my body was going through it. So I was exhausted. I was cold. I did that lensing thing where I thought ahead of me where those houseboats were was the same distance as this thing to my right. It turns out what was to my right was a point 200 yards away. What was ahead of me was over a mile away. And the water was very rough. It was very windy. And you have to contextualize it this is someone who's now, whatever I was, 8 days in, there's a level of exhaustion. So even if I'm strong, I only have so much capability. I was out of fuel. I'm burning, I guess, straight from fat and muscle while I'm out there. The waves are big. And when the wind is present, the waves are scattered. They're not at even intervals. That takes a while to organize. And so you can't time your breaths with the waves very well. I'm sucking in water when I need air because I'm working hard, which creates swimmers are used to it, but it creates a little of a panic feeling when that happens, because that next breath you need to get the air because you start going hypoxic and it becomes more desperate, which usually means you suck in more water. There's this circular effect that can begin that you don't want to have happen. It's demoralizing under those circumstances. It was very hard. And I don't up level all of a sudden in life. I've developed my skills very slowly, but I had to, in that moment, go inside out, even above any of my adventure racing or hypothermic experiences from adventures or these different things I did. I had to up level myself in that last hour of that swim to make it through that section. And it was hard. That was very intense. It turns out that was very needed, because 2 days later on the 11th day, I had misjudged the distance from Antelope to the dam by about half. And it was maybe equally windy, more windy. The waves are bigger because you got sheer walls, so they never stop. They just keep refracting back and forth, and they create these big peaks. So you got kind of this peak activity mixed with the wind and wave activity. Again, totally out of energy. And at this stage, the cliff walls are smooth, so I have nowhere I can stop.
Shane is just a few miles out from the finish line, and at this point, there's a small armada of boats following him on the final stretch, dozens of supporters rooting for him to finish strong.
Given where you're at with food and exhaustion and the side of these waves, and yeah, you got a support boat over there, and at this point, a dozen boats following me to the dam, being very patient. I'm hours past when I'm supposed to finish, but I don't know if they know how dangerous of a place I'm in right now. I may not be able to, if I stop swimming, keep my head above water or even hold on to the stand-up pedal board for buoyancy. Like that's the level that I'm at right now. This is again the periphery, right? Like I can't let that in the center. So as I'm coming into the end, I'm not getting a lot of time to think about the journey because of that, because of the challenge and the wind and trying to make the final miles. The end of day 10, I swam till 11 at night. It's pitch black. I can't really see. I have my lantern on, which is a solar rechargeable, very dim, but I can like lightly see that I'm near the cliff. And so I just kind of track off of that and swim for hours into the night. Now, when I finally got to the point and I just slather myself in petroleum jelly because I'm too cold to get on a wetsuit. I can't physically put it on. And I ate, 300 calories worth of bars that I had there. And then I have that last half mile. And now I turn the point and I can see the dam. That was a good feeling because I knew for sure I was making it. The wind had dropped outside of that channel where it was kind of a vortex. So I knew for sure like I had won that final battle and I was going to make it. And I could appreciate how many boats were around me. I couldn't really appreciate the full journey because I was still just finishing it. That was pretty neat to come around and see that dam and just try and like really take the long strides and you try and time it. And maybe this ego coming back in, but certainly enthusiasm and excitement of like progressively getting stronger. You don't want to sprint as soon as you see the dam. You're going to have to tread water for 5 minutes and take a break. You want to kind of like get to sprint into the end. And so that was a wonderful feeling. I think the capstone feeling is the privilege of the full progression, not the finish. But it was a wonderful feeling to see that dam. And then especially, so my wife and my mom and my mother-in-law were all on a pontoon boat starting at Antelope Marina. So they saw that whole end thing, which is really hard for me. And like, I don't know if they know what's going on here, but I'm really sad that this is what they think this experience has been. But I said hi to everyone and I even hugged everyone, but I wouldn't hug my wife until I finished. I had to earn that moment. It was part of what I had been visualizing the whole time. And so I got to the end and she takes this flying leap off of the front of the pontoon boat and swims over. And so that's the first time I get to, embrace my wife. And that was the you did it moment right there. Yeah. And then as soon as I had that sense of completion, I was able to go say hi to all the other boats and people and thank them for being there and how touched they were. It was meaningful for them too, not just me. They had been part of the journey. There were tears in people's eyes. Someone had written a full song to music about it, which was wild. People had brought me snacks. It was just kind of this great celebration that took place then. If I could add one thing for anyone that feels that little tickle out there to do something hard, weird, maybe that kind of thing they're almost afraid to say what it is, but they know what it is instantly. And it can be so small. It can be like go sing in public or dance in public, or it can be so big. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but like that is the space of expansion and growth and joy, and it's so fulfilling to live there, and it makes your life bigger. I kind of picture as a kid, I think most elementary schools had this exercise where you got a ring of kids in PE and you're holding the edge of a parachute and you loft it up and you get underneath and you enclose it. And you're in this little dome you've created. And then the air comes out and it slowly gets smaller. I think that's life. Every time prefer not to do this. I don't like that. Those are all things that are collapsing that canopy more tightly around us. And so it's that little impulse we have to keep that canopy big or even expand it. And there's so much vitality in keeping that canopy big for yourself. So you have to honor that voice. That voice quiets down if you don't say yes to it. If you want a relationship with that voice, when you feel that little impulse or urge, you need to go after it because it won't keep talking to you if you don't. And if you do, you get to see where it leads. You're never going to have a smaller life for having done that. So I guess that's what I love about this podcast is that type 2 fun and positivity ethic that's inside of it. And I hope that people, if they're listening to it, it's because they feel that. And if they haven't already identified what that is, take a little time for yourself and hear that voice and set out on whatever that is, even if it's as simple as I'm not going to I'm going to fast for a day. I'm just going to not eat for one day to see what happens. Something I'm curious about right now, I didn't get to go a little mad out in the water. What if I take 24 or 48 hours and I fast and just put on like a blindfold and just sit in that sensory deprivation with the energy for my mind to work? And I do that relatively soon. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but those are the voices, right? Like, don't laugh them off too quick. Something cool could come from it.
Thanks, Shane and Jerome, for taking the time to talk with us. What a journey. Incredible. You should check out Shane's Instagram. It's at Shane Scheifer. The link is in the show notes. I check out the daily videos he was posting about his swim on Instagram. They're pretty rad. Another shout out to all you listeners who let us know about this story. We were hit up and we were able to follow along Shane's journey in real time, get to know him that way. It became a story. That's how it works. You can email us at editor@ducktapedandbeer.com if you've got a story idea. Thanks to the folks who have recently become Diaries Plus members and to those that continue to support us. It is the difference between the show being here and not. You are powering the show for the next generation. Thank you. I'm grateful for you on this Thanksgiving. Want another way to help? Review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It helps others find the show and keeps us at the top of the charts. Music today from David Swenson, Chris Molitor, Brendan Burns, Phantom Sun, Marcus Huber, Maud, Peter Jean and the Runaway Queen, Pastek, and Evan Andre. The tracks are courtesy of the artist or track club. Jacob Bain and Nis Koto composed our theme song. You can find the artist at our website, dirtbagdiaries.com. This episode was produced by Marcos Seiler Gonzalez and me, and edited by Evan Phillips. Becca Call is our executive producer. I'm Fitz Call, and you've been listening to the Dirtbag Diaries. Thanks for tuning in.